sick of this. And yes, I did actually quit my job and leave the state. I'll try to keep this video shortish, but in case anyone gets bored, I plan to section this video into chapters. For almost 4 years, I worked at a factory that produced cardboard boxes. We made cardboard boxes for other companies to buy and use for their products. I usually refer to it as a box plant. If you don't know the process that companies or factories go through to make boxes, they have a ton of machines that do a bunch of different things to go through the process. A box plant will have to source its paper from somewhere. Some box plants actually own a forest that they continuously cut down and plant trees. And then they process those trees into giant rolls of paper that weigh like 2 tons. Literally, they're so much bigger than people. I want to say that the rolls of paper are about as big as a car, and they literally weigh 2 tons. So these giant rolls of paper get brought to the facility where they actually make corrugated board, and it gets processed through this huge machine where 2 or 3 of the rolls get fed through the machine, and one kind of gets turned into zigzags, and the other 2 are like the outer paper, and they make these ginormous sheets, probably from one wall of this room to the other, just ginormous sheets of corrugated board. That machine was called the corrugator. Just simply put, the factories that actually have a corrugator like run that machine 24/7. So these boards get taken from the corrugator. They're kind of cut to size, and if a box plant doesn't have its own corrugator, then they'll get their corrugated board from a facility that has one, whether it be from a different company or within the same company. If that plant doesn't have a corrugator, then they get their board from another plant. So when that board gets brought in, depending on what the customer needs, it might get a label put on top of it, or it might be printed directly onto. So the customer will have their own labels made, I think. Depends on the customer, but they'll have their own labels made, and then it goes through this machine that glues the label onto the corrugated board. And also, if the boxes need to be printed upon, then it'll go through one of the machines that can print onto the board with ink, and then, in that process, cut it into the shape that it needs to go into. And the boards with the labels, they go from the labeling machine to a different machine that can cut it to shape. I think it's usually the same machine that can print onto the board. If it has a label, then they just won't do any printing and they'll cut it to shape. And then it gets to the machine that I work on, which simply put is referred to as a folder gluer. It does exactly what it says in the name. It folds and glues the boxes. So the boards get moved around in units no matter what stage they're in. So once they get to a folder gluer, they're in this big unit, and you need to cut the strapping off and take the protective boards off of it. It feed it into the folder gluer. It goes through, it gets folded and glued, and it comes out the other end. And you have to check for any problems. There could be problems with the print. It could be cut oddly. There could be something wrong with the label if it has one. It could be glued incorrectly, whether it be like askew or too much glue and there's some bleed through either outside or inside the box. The box could be glued shut. Whatever issues might be there needs to be taken out at that stage. And then you count however many boxes go in the bundle. I think for most companies wanted it in bundles of 25 boxes. So you count 25 boxes and you put it through a mini strapper machine, and it goes around to what we call the load former, where we basically build another unit, send it out, and it gets strapped by the bander. And every step it gets strapped by the bander, making these green bands. And it gets sent to one of our warehouses and eventually makes its way to the customer. As long as there's nothing wrong. If there's too many bad boxes missed or the operator wasn't doing their job properly, then it would have to be held to be checked, and we'd have to go through the whole thing. It was a giant headache. That's basically what the job did. Before working this job, I worked at a different factory that made furniture, and I worked there as a sewing machine operator. During 2020, with the illness going around the entire planet, that factory was able to stay open because they decided to make hospital gowns and masks. But before 2020 was over, I decided to quit. They weren't really paying very much, and I wanted to focus on some stuff for myself. So I did that for about 6 months, and then ended up needing another job because I ran out of money. And a third-party recruiter for a different factory saw that I had experience as a sewing machine operator and reached out to me and, basically prompted me to apply because they thought I would be a good fit. And I thought about it for a week and decided to go with it since they reached out to me, and they told me that the starting pay that they were paying was like $4 more than what I was looking for. And it was kind of funny because I didn't believe them at first until I went through the interview, asked again, got the same answer, got hired. And when I actually started working and got my first paycheck and I saw how much I was paid, then that's the only time I believed how much I was being paid. Depending on where you live and what career you have, it might not be much to you or it might be a lot, but starting pay when I started working there was like $16.72 an hour or something like that. They put me on the folder gluer, and I, for the first year and a half I was there, I was just learning the 3 positions. So feeding the machine, checking for bad boxes at the other end of the machine, and working the load former. And then my operator left, and out of the people in my crew for that machine on my shift, I was kind of singled out as, a pretty good option to learn how to operate. So I was asked if I wanted to, and it was like, well, that's kind of what I was hired for. So yeah, and then no one else really wanted to, but also I'm a fast learner. So I went through the training process to become an operator for that machine. And after about 2 months, I got, the full operator status and pay and everything. And I learned how to set up the machine and make adjustments, how to adjust how much glue is going in, that whole thing. The other thing about the pay for this company is that we got raises every year. So by the time I left, I was making like $23.66 an hour. Again, depending on what career you're in and where you live, that might be a lot, that might be a little, that might be just fine. For me, it was the most I'd ever made, even with the starting pay. But, it was what it was. With most situations, I tend to be a really fast learner, and I put like 100% into any work that I do, and I tend to do well. So being in that industry and doing well and eventually getting a leadership position and making sure people are safe, I did a pretty good job being there. Anyway, in terms of the work environment, it was really good. There was a lot of camaraderie. A lot of the people that worked there, especially on the first shift, because they had like 3 different shifts when I started working there. There were a lot of people that had been working there for decades. like 20, 30 years. And there are also a lot of people who'd been working there for generations. So it's like, this person that's been working here for 20 or 30 years, like his, you know, parents, or sometimes both their parents, but sometimes just their dad, they worked there before them and their grandfather before them and stuff like that. And, that you have people working who is like, oh, yeah, that's this person's cousin. And, oh, these two people are married. So it was like a family business, but like a large corporation where a lot of families kind of just work there for a long time. They treat people well. They had really decent benefits, vision, dental, healthcare, things for your family if you have one. And if anything major changed, then you could go and get your benefits shifted. I only ever got dental and vision, although I never used my vision, even though I paid for it every week for about 4 years straight. I failed to go get my eyes checked. I still need to go get my eyes checked. That place was one of those places that would offer you so much overtime. Whenever they'd say, hey, we need you to work overtime, you'd be like, no. The worst part of the job is that it was a very physical job. When they first hire you on, they send you to a doctor to get a physical done, making sure that you can lift 50 pounds and that you're healthy enough and all this other stuff. And then they bring you in for orientation. You go through orientation for about a week, and then you actually start working on the floor. Working that job, especially the first year, when I would get home, I'd be too tired to do anything else. And when I did start working overtime consistently, I almost ended up in the hospital from fatigue because I was physically moving 12 hours a day, but I neglected to eat more to keep up with it. As far as my weight went, my main struggle in life was learning how to either gain or maintain weight, because I had a fast metabolism and, I'd lose weight really fast without trying. So when I got put on overtime and I was doing 12 hours a day of a very physical job and only eating and I had to add another meal every day to, but by then I had lost like 20 pounds in a month, and that was really bad. I stopped working overtime for a month, and then after fixing my eating habits and eating more, then I was able to do overtime for like 2 more months in a row after that. So I was on the schedule to do overtime for 4 months in a row, but I could only do 3 because after the first one, the fatigue, was bad. It kind of created a situation to where I was trying to lift something that was usually easy to lift. It was just like 5-10 pounds, but my arms were struggling. It's like they couldn't or wouldn't lift it, and that was bad. Of course, during the month I wasn't doing overtime. I was still working every day. I was just doing 8 hours instead of 12. Also, when you do overtime, you get paid time and a half. So that also really helped. A little bit before I left, I actually got transferred into working in an office because someone in the office needed extra help. And the person who had that position before them needed some help on his way out. And I got asked if I would be willing to, and I did. So I learned how to do some stuff on the computer for the company. And sometime after the new person took that position, they needed some help because I had a little bit of experience. I did the same thing. So I also learned how to check emergency stations, like eye wash stations and stuff like that, going around the building and checking, make sure each one was working properly, the eye wash stations and the overhead showers. So that was a lot. But, it was pretty good experience. Oh, yeah. Another thing about working at this place was the amount of dust. Because the plant was constantly working with paper like 24/5 or 24/6.5 some weeks. There would be dust everywhere. No matter, and we would try our best to sweep in between shifts. Some people didn't do it because, they just wanted to go home. But, we try our best to sweep in between shifts so that the floor wasn't too slippery because there would be that much dust. But it would get on the floor, it would get on the machine, it would get on our clothes, just every surface from floor to ceiling. And they were very high ceilings. Like, man, can't remember how high. I want to say like close to 30-foot ceilings. But from floor to ceiling, there would be just dust everywhere. It wasn't enough to where we like needed to wear masks to protect our breathing. I mean, we wore masks like up to a year after the illness stopped circling the globe. But, it wasn't enough to cause like a breathing hazard unless you were like allergic to dust. And some people who worked there were allergic to dust, but it mostly just made them sneeze a lot. And of course, if you were cleaning, then they actually did give us masks because there would be so much dust and everything. But yeah, I'd go home every day and have dust in all my work clothes. And I would never wear anything nice, like anything like this shirt or these pants, anything like remotely that I find like enjoyable to wear. I wouldn't wear it at that place because it would be covered in dust, and then the dust over time would get so ingrained that it would cause like those little beady beads in clothes that you kind of like gotta pick out or cut out. Yeah. There would be dust everywhere. I think I actually still have my work hat. There might still be dust in it. So yeah, this is a bump cap. It's kind of hard to see. This is a bump cap. So to protect our heads from any minor bumps, we would put these in a baseball cap. And I've been keeping my work stuff pretty safe. So there's kind of still work dust in it. I don't know if the camera's getting it, but it's an example of how dusty this place was. Wearing the bump caps is an example of personal protective equipment, or we would refer to it as PPE. You work in any industry where you need personal protection and you'll have PPE. So we had those hats, we had gloves, we also had to wear steel-toed shoes. And about twice a year, they actually pretty much gave us pretty good steel-toed boots and shoes twice a year. They would have certain companies come bring these trucks, and we'd have a little pass that it had a financial limit. The limit was over $100, and if you hit that very specific limit, then anything over you'd have to pay for. But there was plenty of stuff you could get. So that was another good thing about working there. Working as the operator there, one of the things I was in charge of, other than paperwork and staying on task and keeping time and making sure we hit goal for the day, the list continues for a little bit. But I was also in charge of making sure my team stayed safe. And whenever we got a new addition to the crew, because sometimes people would leave or sometimes people would get moved to a different machine, I would have to go through training again with a new person, and I'd have to go through all of the safety stuff. Now, a lot of these machines that I went over are very dangerous because of the speed at which they move and having all these different kinds of blades to cut through all the paper. Some are like rotary blades. They're like giant wooden things kind of crafted in a huge cylinder with like wood. Well, yeah, they are made out of wood, but with foam and, blades kind of in them, kind of going in a circle. Of course, they're inside the machine, so they close, but the machines are able to like open and you're able to go in. Of course, there's safety precautions, lockout, tag out. Again, there are several different factories that have these kind of systems, but it could be very dangerous with the way that things move and stuff like that. Oh yeah, in terms of PPE, we also had like cut resistant sleeves. We weren't allowed to wear jewelry or anything hanging off of us. I like to wear a lot of rings, especially outside of work, like necklaces. I'm usually also wearing earrings. You know, you could have baggy things hanging off of you. Hoods too. None of that was allowed in the plant because if any moving machinery got caught on the edge of your ring, it could get caught like this. It will take your finger with it. And of course, with all the blades we worked with, in my orientation, they showed pictures of injuries that people had gotten working in this industry. And the people that came after me, they didn't always get that slide where it showed injuries people could get. But, you know, people get their arms completely sliced open, fingers missing, bits of fingers missing. Worst case scenario, you get crushed or hanged. So one of the reasons why you don't wear hoods in facilities like that is because some of the machinery, like the label making machine, it brings the boards overhead and there's moving parts. So a lot of people like duck down to pass under it. If you're wearing a hood, it could get yanked up. And even if you're wearing something that zips up, it'll get yanked so fast, there's literally nothing you could do about it. You go without air and yeah. You kind of leave this planet. I'll put it that way. It's horrible. The last time at the plant that I worked at where someone had to leave the planet, it was before they actually put a bunch of safety precautions in. I won't go into too much detail about it, but while I was working there at a different plant in the same company, there was someone who actually did wear their hood and it got snatched in the machine that I mentioned, the label gluing machine. The machine has an actual name, but I don't want to say it in case it's like a machine that is very specific to the plant. I'm not sure. Most likely not, but I'm better safe than sorry. But yeah, so there was someone at a different plant who did lose their life while I was working there. Not at my plant though, but of course we heard about it because they told the entire company, hey, remember to reinforce this rule that we have. Don't let people wear jackets with hoods, you know. So no jackets with hoods, no hoodies, stuff like that. So most people would wear beanies, you know, under their hats and, you know, earplugs, stuff like that, you know. It was also very, very loud. Ah, I forgot. Another thing with earplugs. There was very little temperature control. They changed it in the middle of me working there. Like they added some stuff. But in the summers, it would get really, really hot indoors. So they did their best to like give us fans and like water, and we had to keep an eye on each other for any signs of like heat stroke or anything like that. And in the winters, it was really cold, so we would all have to bundle up. Sometimes we'd be able to see our breath inside. Before I left, though, they added like heaters and things, so that was good. Also, hot hands are your best friend when you're working in the winter and you don't have a heater. Hot hands are fantastic. Yeah, so it was a very dangerous job. I worked there for almost 4 years and I left with all my digits because I was safe. One thing though is as I was working there, my nails would break a lot. So I would have to like keep my nails short. And at some point they had a rule to where we couldn't even like paint our nails. I mean, like, I don't think anyone listened. But like we weren't supposed to like do or paint our nails because if it chipped it could, you know, get caught in boards and stuff and get shipped to the customer and the customer would complain. I mean, I didn't really paint my nails much anyway, because even with like the dip nail polish where it's like hard, it would, because the work was so brutal on my hands, even with the gloves on, my nails would start chipping within a couple days. And if I wasn't working there with the same polish and everything, it would take me like a week or two for it to start chipping. But yeah, so what's the point of getting my nails done if it's only going to last a couple days? And then it would also break my nails a lot because my nails are pretty bendy. I mean, you can hear it. But I've been away, so I have my nails now. In terms of sewing, I can't remember what age I was. I was either like a bigger kid or entering high school or something, but I think something needed to be patched, and my mom kind of taught me how to work a needle and thread. I mean, it's really easy. Just thread the needle, tie a knot, and stitch what you need, and then tie it off, and you're done. But from there, I would make little things by hand sometimes. Especially in high school, I like made gloves, kind of like this, except without the paw. Like emo or goth type gloves I actually made by hand, again like this, same shape and everything. And sometimes I made like little hearts, just tiny little fabric hearts, and stuffed them with stuffing, again sewing it by hand. It would take me days to do these things. But that's the beginning of my sewing. All the way up to when I was about to get into college, I handmade like a stuffed animal for who was about to be my first roommate. She told me her favorite animal and her favorite colors, and she was from another country. So I made that animal, and with her three favorite colors, I made kind of like a traditional outfit for that animal. I'm not trying to get into too much specifics because I don't want it to ring too many bells if it ever gets to someone. I'll probably go into it more one day and show pictures and stuff, but that's that's if I get where I'm going. I did all that by hand. And in college, I was a theater major and a Japanese minor. So in the college that I went to, the way that they had it is that there were three different focuses for theater. There was an acting focus, a stage building focus, or set building focus, where you also learn how to do lighting. There are lighting classes. You worked with wood, all this other stuff. And then there was the costuming focus. And no matter which your focus was, you had to take the first class of each focus. And it kind of built this system to where everyone who was working together at that university understood what the other people did, to kind of help make a more cohesive team effort. So, of course, I had an acting focus because, so I had an acting focus, but I still had to take the first classes of the set building focus and the costume making focus. So in college, I learned how to work with wood. So, had uh, basically plan out what you want to build, and, just the basics of cutting the wood and safety protocol and things like that. In the more advanced classes, they went into like things like welding and how to build structures that can like hold a whole lot of weight and all this other stuff. And I believe, lighting classes, like I said. But I learned basics of like woodworking. And in that class, for my final project, I actually built myself a sewing table and a stool. And technically, we're only supposed to make one thing, but I basically made two because I made a table and a stool. It was really good. Like, I painted it black, and it was made to look like the night sky with the moon in the corner and speckled with stars, and same thing on the stool. It was very comfy. But those things are pretty much broken because other people broke them. Anyway, It's in the costume construction class where I learned how to use a sewing machine. And it was very scary, but I did it. In that class, we also learned the basics of like, designing, like how to draw a rendering. You sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and you draw out what you want to make, and then you make plans to make it. I mean, that's the same thing with the set building class, although I'm pretty sure I took the costume construction class first. But they also taught you how to make basic pattern pieces and, things like that. So in college, I learned pretty much the basics for the entire process of making costumes or clothing in general. And I already liked to draw, like, as a little kid. And, they ask, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my answer was the same for years, all the way up to college. I want to be a singer, an actress, and an artist of some sort. I want to sing with groups of people. I want to act, and I want to do something that has to do with drawing. And it's kind of cool because sewing incorporates drawing. I mean, when you're designing, drawing, and I really enjoy the process of sewing. The whole process. Um, but I already had a habit of drawing, like all the way from like apparently when I was about 3, the main thing I would draw was like eyes, because my mom taught us. I say us because I have siblings, but my mom taught us how to draw eyes, and we would just draw eyes, and apparently we impressed people, including in the daycare that we went to every day. So that's interesting. uh, So I had been drawing pretty much all my life. Same thing with singing. I sang all my life. I was in choir and choruses all the way from kindergarten to college. I miss singing in a group. I might I might try to find a group to sing with. Although I actually want to learn how to sing in like a more metal style. I think that would be really cool. But hey, if I can, I can. If I can't, it is what it is. It'll be on the list to do, once I go through everything else I'm trying to do. Going back to that class I was in, because I got off topic, as I want to do, we learned how to make pattern pieces, like flat pattern making. In the advanced class, they went into drapery and stuff like that, but I never took the advanced classes because I was acting. But we learned how to flat pattern make and sew it on the machine. And again, for my final project, we were just supposed to make technically just one piece of clothing that incorporated everything we learned in that class. So from designing to flat pattern making, and then going to Joann's and picking out the fabric and sewing it together with a closure, basically. And I kind of made this dress jacket and a skirt with gloves because I really like gloves. I wanted the 2-piece outfit to just be the final project, and it's like, oh, you don't have to. I told the instructor, oh, you don't have to count the gloves. It's just something extra I wanted to fit in the outfit. And I remember her like looking at my gloves because something that they said in that costume shop is that making gloves is hard. For me, it was never too hard, especially since I started off literally stitching them by hand. So with a machine, it's actually so much faster. Sewing with a machine is so much faster than stitching something by hand. You spend days just going like this. And instead, you can just do a couple minutes just in a straight line. It's fantastic. Love technology. Oh my gosh. So I remember the instructor looking at the gloves that I made, and she was like, yeah, I'm including them in your grade. I'm like, dang it. Anyway, I got the highest score possible, more or less, even with the gloves included. So maybe the gloves gave me bonus points. I don't know. I still have bits of that project somewhere. I think I have a few things actually here with me, and the other thing is, and the other thing. So, just to clarify, the state that I went to college in and the state that I lived in before this state was a different state. So, the course of me talking about the history of everything, I'm talking about living through 3 different states here. Throughout my entire life, I have moved a lot. After college, yeesh. So, my college career was ended for me. You know, some people go through college and they find it's not what they want to do, so they leave, or they're unable, or they don't have the skill to fully get through college, so they leave, or life happens and they leave, you know, in terms of people who don't finish college, you know, people who drop out on purpose. Hey, it's the squish faced old lady. Hey, old lady. In my case, I went through something very traumatic, and the very traumatic thing happened within my first semester. So that gave me a pretty crappy set of mental illnesses, which I would try to fight through for about 2 years. I actually have my college transcript, and each semester, my grades would just get worse and worse. Mind you, I was a straight A student in high school, and usually whatever grade you get in high school just go down a grade in college. So I was basically set to be a B student in college, but because of trying to fight through trauma to keep my grades up and failing, I was, well, failing. The thing that really ended my college career was the inability to physically get back for my 3rd year of college. And I'm the type of person where school was always important to me. You know, I did well in school, but also I enjoy learning, you know, and like I said, school was very important to me as well as to my family in general. And it really tore me up when I couldn't go back. Like, I was trying to find a way there and I couldn't. And then the semester started and I was still trying. And then it, you know, time passed and it became too late for me to get there, even if I did find a way there. Yeah, it's upsetting, but it is what it is. But after college, I continued sewing on my own, basically honing my skill. So I think the last time I was able to attend class was back in like 2017. So, I mean, yeah, it's 2025 now, so it's been a while, but that entire time I've kept sewing as much as I can. So I've gotten a lot better over the years and I can put together some pretty complex things. I still haven't learned drapery yet because I don't have a dress form, you know, that mannequin that you sew on. I do not have a dress form yet, so I haven't been able to practice drapery, but that's actually something that I plan to do soon. Most of the things that I have sewn over the years I've made for myself, but I have sewn a few things for other people. And I did have plans to make a business of sewing things, custom things for other people. And that's something I still kind of want to do at some point. Oh, I never said why I liked sewing. I decided to sew more clothing for myself because I'm shaped funny. So I'll take off my jacket to kind of show. Of course, I've gained a little bit of weight because my metabolism has finally slowed down and I finally found my comfortable weight and then I passed it. So right now I'm weighing at about 150 pounds, but 130 is where I'm more comfortable. So I'm actually, for the first time, going to deliberately try to lose weight. Anyway, for my entire life, the top half of my body has been like a small, extra small. With the weight that I have on me now, it's more like a medium, which is not that far off. It's not that much of a change, but a little bit of a change. But the bottom half of my body has always been like a medium large. And the biggest thing about how I'm shaped is how my back curves, because it goes from the small of my back and curves drastically. And this is just how I'm naturally shaped. Trying to find clothes in stores that physically fit me, especially if they go from top to bottom, like a dress or a romper or something, is almost impossible because it doesn't really fit this shape really well. I mean, like thighs. That's one of the reasons why after college I fully dove into sewing things for myself. Is because it's hard to find things that fit me, and most things that I buy from a store I have to tailor to fit me. Another reason why I prefer to make things from scratch is because I'm very picky when it comes to style. When I finally figured out how to define what I like and what I don't like, or rather a way to design something I like 100%, that's what I lean towards, because I could go into a store and it's hard for something to actually catch my eye, because sometimes I walk into a store, kind of walk in a big circle, and I leave and I was like, there's nothing in here. And sometimes something will catch my eye in the window and I go walk up to it and I look at every bit of whatever it is, whether it be pants or a shirt or a dress or whatever. I usually end up finding something about it that I don't like. It's like, I don't like how they sewed this thing to look like that. And it's like, I really, really like the neck part, but I don't like the rest of it. And I end up not getting anything because there's stuff about it that I don't like. So with designing and sewing my own clothes, it could be completely my style. And the only thing I dislike about it is some minor mistakes that no one can see but me. I'm going to put my jacket back on. I cannot remember when or how I started becoming interested in Japanese as a language and Japan as a culture and as a country. It's just something that's pretty much always been there. And I can look at my parents, especially my mom, and she also has the same interest in Japan and Japanese culture and language, but it's not really for the same reasons, and it's not really in the same way. So it's something she and I have in common, but I don't think it's something I internally inherited from her, I have no idea why I've always had an interest in Japan, but I have. So, as a kid watching anime and, wanting to learn Japanese, but not having the resources to do so. If we had found a school that taught Japanese in their curriculum or, as an elective, that would have been great. But by the time I got into high school, the only option was Spanish. And I do intend on learning Spanish one day, but preferably after learning Japanese. So I didn't have access to anything, but in high school, there was like an advertisement for something called Pimsleur, and it was like a free trial thing. They sent you a week's worth of lessons for free, and then you could sign up, and then through that you could sign up for something that would allow you to get the other lessons for free as long as you send it back within a certain amount of time. So I signed up for it, and I still have that CD somewhere, but I have the first 10 lessons of Pimsleur. So in my senior year of high school, I was able to get my hands on something to teach me Japanese. And it was kind of crazy how much I was learning at the speed I was learning it. But my mom kind of found out that I got like a prepaid card that they would charge to if they did send me the other CDs and I didn't send it back in time. And she made me cancel it. So I never got the other lessons. Or at that time, I wasn't able to get the other lessons. So when I went into college, I wanted to be able to do a Japanese major, but they didn't offer that. They only had a Japanese minor. Although the way that the teacher had the curriculum. It should have been a major with how much she was teaching us in such little time. um, but that's where I actually started learning Japanese. So I learned hiragana and katakana and some kanji and a lot of vocabulary and, more and more about the culture. I think starting at my second semester and then for a couple semesters after that, I had a roommate who was from Japan. I made several friends from Japan. I actually made friends who were from a lot of different countries: India, China, Korea, Germany, Brazil. I met some people from France, but I didn't make friends with people from France. But yeah, I'm the type of person who is able to make friends with a lot of different people, almost especially if they're from another country. I'm not sure why. It's something to do with my personality or something. Of course, the traumatic thing happened and I was fighting through my trauma to keep learning, but life eventually kicked me out of college and ended my academic career. So after college, I found ways to study on my own. For hiragana and katakana, while I was in college, my favorite app to use was something called Kanatown. Although I think about a year ago, that app was taken down, and iPhones do this thing where every now and then they delete non-used apps from your phone. And if you try to use it, it has this download thing. You need to download it, like re-download it. And because that app was gone, I have recently lost I have recently lost the ability to use one of my favorite apps for going over hiragana and katakana for Japanese, and it makes me really sad. And I actually was going to use Kanatown for one of the videos that I'm going to be doing after this one, but I'm going to have to use one of the other apps I have instead since Kanatown is officially gone. When I was between the two factory jobs, when I had left the sewing machine operator position from the company that made furniture, I was using those 6 months that I had saved up for to focus on learning Japanese fully on my own and finish sewing some projects and learn about business just by myself. I put myself on my own daily schedule, set a bunch of alarms for it, and I was just doing things every day. And I actually got pretty far into the beginning stages of learning Japanese in terms of like vocabulary and stuff like that. I was heading into N4, especially for kanji. For learning kanji, I was like there's another app that I use that will be shown in the video where I'm going over Japanese a little bit. There's like a list of kanji that the app goes over, and it's sectioned by the difficulty. So N5 being the easiest, N4 being the next, then N3, N2, and N1. Anyway, I got more than halfway through that kanji list for N4 before I started working for the box plant. And I was on Hello Talk pretty much every day. I made a couple friends, and we were doing the whole language exchange thing. That was a lot of fun. My Japanese actually got pretty decent. I was able to hold very simple conversations, but still use Japanese within conversation to a decent degree. And I was helping a lot of people with their English because that's something I do well somehow, helping people correct their English. I don't know all the terminology and I don't have all the rules memorized as to why things are the way they are, but I did pretty well with that. So after those 6 months were up, I ended up working at the box plant and I became too tired to do anything outside of work. And then when I finally got a system down to start restudying things outside of work, they kind of changed things. And I think that's when they put me on overtime. And then that's where I was spending all my time. And then after that, I was too tired to do anything outside of work. And then over the course of the few years I was there, it was back and forth on studying Japanese when I could, and then something changing, whether they put me on a different shift or I was suddenly on overtime because someone was going on vacation or someone had left, or just anything. I have a habit of putting like 150% into whatever job I'm working. So I didn't have any energy left for myself. And when I got used to whatever work I was doing there and then would manage to make time for myself to study or show, something would change at work. And then that's where all my energy would shift to. And it was just this cycle. I quit my job to be able to reach my goals. So, biologically speaking, a human being reaches somewhere between 25 and 27, dependent on the person and their gender. Guys tend to develop a little bit later than girls, even in that time frame. But your prefrontal cortex finishes developing. From about 2019 to 2022-ish, I was kind of lost as far as the direction my life should be going. So I wasn't able to finish college, which broke my heart, but I was trying to push forward with my work career anyway. And I was told that I have an entrepreneurial mind. So I was heading in the direction of, creating my service for sewing custom pieces for people. But I wasn't getting there as quickly as I felt like I should, and I was still focused on work in the regular sense. And I was just still working on my sewing and my learning Japanese as much as I could and kind of heading in that direction. Also, something weird about me is that since I was about 13 years old, I've had, well, I've always called them daydreams, but some people over the course of my life had told me that they're most likely more so visions, but of me schooling in Japan and meeting certain people and basically kind of like seeing the day to day of how that would be. And of course, IRL daydreaming or seeing that every single day, basically since I was 13 years old. But when I turned about 26, ow! When I turned about 26, it kind of clicked for me. Things happening in my life were slowly lining up to things that I had been seeing in my daydreams. And also, I found that it is possible to go to school in Japan, no matter what your age. And while I was in college, I actually did try to sign up for the foreign exchange program, but it didn't work out because I stopped being able to attend. But I found out that it's possible for someone to go to school in Japan. There technically isn't an age limit and all this other stuff. I found that sewing is the main avenue that I like to do the things that I've liked to do since I was, a kid. There isn't really much singing or acting involved, but, those can be side things. When I was a kid, So as a kid, I figured that acting would be my main thing, and then singing and drawing would be my side things. And going through life as an adult, I think sewing and drawing, pretty much, sewing and designing will be my main things. And as I can, my acting will be shifted more so toward voice acting, and singing will continue to be a thing that I do often. Whether I find a group to sing with, or I still just do it as like a day-to-day hobby, it's always going to be a part of my life. When I was about 26, I realized that this is something very important to me to do for my life, to finish my schooling, to fully learn Japanese, to continue my sewing, all of that. All of that is the main thing I want to focus on. When you realize exactly where you want to go, you need to examine where you are. And looking at where I was working at my job, with it being so physical, I didn't have much time or energy. Within the 4 years of me working there, I didn't have too much time or energy to really do the things that I wanted to do. So the entire time I was working there, I was still like studying Japanese on and off and sewing on and off. You know, sometimes I'd go an entire year without doing either, and it sucked. So financially speaking, my job put me in a very good position, but it was keeping me from being able to do the things that were most important to me. Also, they were continually raising the rent at my apartment. So even when I got my raise, when I became an operator, they raised the rent at the same rate that my pay was raised. So there was like no financial difference. And then, of course, the next time I had to sign the lease, it was raised just a little bit more than that. So it's like, okay, I can't really afford to live here, but I can't afford to live anywhere else because, you know, I lived about 6 miles away from where I worked. So transportation was pretty decent. Also, I don't drive. So I was using Uber and Lyft to get to work, to and from work. And that cost me anywhere between $500 and $700 a month, dependent on how much they were charging, because both Uber and Lyft like to fluctuate their prices a lot. It's kind of ridiculous. I am a physically small person. Apparently, I am stronger than I look in terms of how much I can do, and I am pretty resilient. So there were people who were physically stronger than me who started working after I did and quit way sooner. They didn't even get past the probation period. You know, I'm a very determined person, and I more so, you know, figured out technique in terms of like lifting things and doing all this stuff rather than my strength alone. So that caused me to work very well at the box plant, but it was also very tiring. I remember my first few months working there, kind of getting used to the physical activity, and sometimes I'd go home and make myself a bath to soak in, and I'd end up crying in the bathtub with how much pain I was in. But of course, that's when I was first starting. Of course, when you're doing that for a few years, your body gets used to it. You know, it still hurts and aches and stuff, but it's not to crying levels. But still, you know, long term, I didn't want to keep working there, you know, putting that much pressure on my body. It was also taking time and energy away from the things that aren't most important. And, you know, now that I have a very clear vision as to what I want to focus on for the next several years, staying there wasn't the best. Financially speaking, staying there was decent, but time-wise, time and energy for the things that are important was not the best. My boyfriend suggested that I move in with him, so financially, you know, the cost of living month to month for me personally is down by a lot. So we planned it out that way. I put in a 3-week notice because I have an operating position. Technically, 2 weeks would have been fine, but I decided to do 3 in case they needed to find another operator. By then, I think they had already removed one of the shifts. So, you know, they got rid of one of the shifts, but they didn't let go of anyone. So they had plenty of people to do different things. So I think by the time I left, they had plenty of people who were able to take my spot immediately. Although by the time I left, I was more so working in the office, and since I wasn't operating much anymore, since it was my shift that they got rid of, I was moved to another shift, and I was basically working as a helper. I quit my job and left the state to move in with my boyfriend and decrease how much I need financially month to month, and also get my time back so I can focus on studying Japanese every day and sewing more. Because one of the things that I've wanted to do over the last several years was sew my closet. So I have way more designs in my design books, because I have two design books, because I've been designing things for myself since 2017. I have way more things designed in my books than I have actually physically made. And I kind of have enough designs to make like 3 closets worth of things for myself, but I just want to make one. So I already have a habit of wearing things I have made myself, but I really would like a full closet so I can have enough things that I like. Something that goes along with me realizing what I want to do with my life is fully figuring out what my style is. It's still hard to put into words, but you know, in terms of my designs and everything like that, I have plenty of it. I just need to make it. I just needed the time to make it. Because in my apartment, I did have a sewing room. So I had the space, I had all the material I could need because, you know, I had plenty of money. So I have everything I need. I just didn't have the time. Same thing with studying Japanese. I have literally everything I need basically to become fluent. I just didn't have the time. So by leaving my job, that gives me all the time that I need, more or less. When I quit my job, my original plan was to move here November 2024, take 2 weeks to rest, and then spend a month and a half setting up my sewing room, and then late December uploading my first YouTube video and following a daily schedule where I'm studying, sewing, and making content. But things didn't go that way. I have a fans page where I go over the entire timeline and actually upload videos that I recorded during these last 6 months or so. I wasn't on schedule for my original plan, and I fell into a depressive state for about a month and a half, and then I came out of it and paced myself to finish everything I was doing. So for the first few seconds of this video, you kind of see how much I did to this room. On a different website, I went through everything that I did within these last several months. But the reason why I'm deciding to make content is because before I moved, I had plans to sew a few things for my closet and then move. But things changed again. I was moved from the office to the floor and then put on overtime and then on and off overtime. And then I just stayed on overtime until I left. And I didn't have time to sew anything but like a dress that I made. While I was going through the process of, you know, losing time several months before the move, I decided to start making content. So the plan now is to still make my closet like I've always wanted to, but I'll turn it into content. I'll also upload content about my process for learning Japanese on my own. So when I was between factory jobs, those 6 months I set out for myself, I did really well studying on my own. And during the global illness, there was more content uploaded about doing all kinds of things, including studying a language by yourself. So, you know, the Tobita textbooks were made and a few other resources, and people made more videos guiding people on how to go about things. And while I was working, I did kind of come up with my own process for going over vocabulary. In those 6 months I spent studying on my own, I did find several apps that helped me in my process. So I'm going to make content kind of going over my process for learning Japanese by myself. On TikTok, every day, I think I'm going to make that the main place where I go over vocabulary every day. So if there's anyone who wants to go over Japanese vocabulary with me, they can do that on TikTok. Also on TikTok, when I finish projects, I'll probably have fun videos that are fun shorts that I put there. On Instagram, whenever I finish a project, I'll probably post progress pictures and how it looks when it's finished. I don't really have a schedule for that, so that'll be just whenever. So maybe once a week, maybe more, maybe less. It depends on how fast I sew. On YouTube, I plan on uploading content once a week. It might have to do with sewing, it might have to do with learning Japanese, or just me talking about the two. Mostly sewing projects. So originally I was going to upload my first YouTube video with 2 others. So me going over everything that I just talked about, a video of me seeing where I am as far as what I remember for Japanese, and a video where I create a channel rendering. But to give myself some space, I'm gonna go ahead and upload this video on its own, and then those 2 videos will come out in the subsequent weeks. As far as what I have lined up, I have planned a video where I do some shoe painting. I forgot to mention that's also something I've been doing as well as sewing for years. Just basic patterns painted on shoes, but I do paint and alter shoes. So I'll have some of that on the channel as well. I have 2 pairs of shoes that I plan on altering so far. There's my entire closet that I need to make. But as far as recent videos for the next 2 months, it's going to be the 3 I went over, 1 pair of shoes that I'm going to be painting, me remaking something I made years ago that's currently falling apart that I need because I use it every night, and then me tailoring 2 things. After that, I have planned making like a sewing uniform. So whenever I'm sewing something, I'll be wearing the same thing, and that thing will be something that I have made myself. So I'm making a video for that as well. So I have things planned for the next 2 months, and then after that, I can pick whatever design I want to make next, and that'll be the next video. So I'll have something every week for the foreseeable future. Also mixed in with that, I'll most likely for YouTube make progress videos for my Japanese studying. So if I want to sit down and talk about things, I can. And maybe in a couple years I'll have, full videos in Japanese. We'll see. We'll see. I have several accounts made for TheKittySewist. For Twitch, I will be having sewing streams when I'm ready. Right now, I have made a Twitch account. I'm not doing anything with it until I feel like I'm on my daily schedule enough to be able to do it starting off twice a week. But of course, when I get to that point, I'll let everyone know. As of right now, I have a beacons page for all the pages that I have. Something kind of controversial that I'm doing is having kind of like a fans page. So people who want to follow more of what I'm doing or get extra videos can go to that page. So I was thinking about having a Patreon, but I couldn't figure out what to do as far as tiers went. And on Instagram, Instagram's usually where you post like thirst traps and stuff like that, but I don't really want to. So the controversial thing I'm doing is kind of making a fans page. So basically all that stuff, extra videos and I guess like pictures where I look extra nice, they're going to be put behind a paywall. And I don't expect to get a ton of followers on that, but I made the page, and the very controversial thing is where the page is. I will probably never make adult content because I'm too much of a prude. But the page is on OnlyFans. So my OnlyFans page will be a mix between Patreon and Instagram. I'll pretty much never make adult content. As time goes on, there will be plenty of thirst trap pictures, I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying to go about things in a way that is kind of true to me as a person. Because I won't be making adult content, I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people will follow my OnlyFans, because usually that's what people go to OnlyFans for. I mean, when OnlyFans first came out, that was the namesake, only people's biggest fans kind of went and followed their pages, and they did all kinds of stuff. Maybe I should refer to it as often friendly, because I don't know if YouTube is against those words. The pages that did the best on often friendly were the ones that were already owned by celebrities. So the way that regular people got around that was by making adult content. I mean, of course, there were already people on there that made adult content that were already famous, but people found that if they didn't have much of a following and then they made an after friendly page and then advertised it, they could make a lot of money that way. So it's become synonymous with adult content. Of course, I will never make adult content because I'm a prude. But, I decided to make the page in my own way. So I already have a lot of posts there that kind of details the whole process of me being here. So me moving in, me setting up the room, and me going through my depressive state. All that is there already, plus some extra stuff. And I'll be posting more things as I go. So if I sew more than one thing a week, whatever extra thing I make, I'll probably put on that page. I'll also put blooper stuff. If you've seen any animals walking around behind me, you'll see a little bit more of them on that page. I assume that most people will think it weird to have an often friendly page and it not be a type of page that it's synonymous for. People go there for adult stuff, and I have a page there that has nothing to do with adult stuff. So, maybe I'll have, I don't know, maybe some people will go there and maybe people won't. Also, the other thing about my page is that as far as often friendly pages goes, it's expensive. What most people do on that site is they have the subscription price kind of low, but then they don't post too many things. I mean, as far as I've heard, they don't post too many things, but then they'll DM all of their followers things to pay for. And then that's how they get about half of the money that they make. Starting out, I don't really want to do too much of that because my focus is mostly going to be sewing and studying. So I decided to go about it this way, to where I won't do too many pay-per-view things. The subscription price is where it is, and then you'll get several videos. I mean, right now, the longest video that I have posted on that page is about 45 minutes long, and I made it 45 minutes by accident because apparently I can talk a lot. And then, of course, the shortest videos on that page that I have uploaded so far, about 30 seconds. And it's just some time lapses that I recorded while doing all of this. The main thing I'm going to be doing from day to day is studying and sewing. But I have a huge financial goal. So I do plan on applying to go to school in Japan once I reach about an N2, maybe an N1. I want to apply to go to university in Japan and study fashion design. And by going to school in Japan, I'm killing 7 birds in one stone. I'll be improving my Japanese. I will be living in Japan for a time. I'll be visiting certain places in Japan that I've always wanted to go. I'll be seeing what the heck my visions are about. Either it was just some sort of mental push for me to go there, or stuff I'd seen will happen. I have no idea. All that is a lot. I have a list of each thing it'll accomplish on my phone. I'll finish my schooling, which is very important to me, and it'll be in a subject that I really care about. For me personally, I feel like it'll finish forming me as a person, because I don't know, I feel like there's this thing missing that I need, and by doing this, by following this goal that I feel so strongly about, I'll be able to accomplish what's missing. And finishing school is very important to me. I did a ton of research for the entire process of applying to a university in Japan, and then after getting accepted, applying for a student visa and everything like that. And I did the research for trying to do so for people who are over 30 years old, because I'm pretty sure by the time I'm able to do all of this, I will have passed the age of 30. In terms of the cost for me to go to school in Japan for 4 years altogether, it'll be $300,000, which is a lot, but not a lot. It depends on how much money you earn or what family you were born to or what life experiences you've had. $300,000 can either be a lot or not a lot. But if you think in terms of how much money exists in the world, $300,000 isn't a lot at all. You know, there are people who go viral on the internet and they make millions. You know, there are people who can make $300,000 in a month. There are people who spend $1 million for fun. And that's a whole thing. But I feel like it's very plausible for me. Through the course of my journey, I figure that I'm going to have to make maybe around $600,000 because my income tax for all of that, plus my day-to-day living, and I'm in a small amount of debt. Nothing crazy, just a few $1,000s. But $300,000 would carry me through the entirety of the 4 years. It would pay for my living expenses, my food, you know, cleanliness, the applications to get to school, the initial trip to Japan, you know, being able to leave Japan for several years. I actually made an entire list because when I did my research, I put it all in a paper that I wrote for myself. And I have a literal list for what $300,000 would cover. So that's fantastic. But I think it's, like I said, I'm pretty sure it's doable, you know, putting away $300,000, you know, to be able to achieve my dreams. And I have plans for, well, content creation to help with that, but also stuff outside of content creation that should also help toward that goal. And I decided after I hit my financial goal, dependent on whatever audience I have, I may or may not continue to make videos with my helmet. Yeah, once I hit my financial goal, I'll probably do like a face reveal and then make the rest of my videos without my helmet. And then once I start going to school in Japan, then I'll continue making videos on the things that I make. This channel might become like some sort of like, Japanese vlogging channel. It's something that a lot of people do. They go to Japan or they live in Japan and then they upload videos every so often of, places they go, the things they do, the whole process. So that might be what I do from then, So it's an idea. If you have similar goals or just have different really big goals that you're aiming for, maybe leave it in the comments. I'll be interested to see what kinds of things people are getting into. If you want to help me out, there are 2 buttons beneath the video. They look like this. Just pick one. If you're interested in seeing my sewing and my Japanese learning journey, subscribe and ring the bell, all the stuff. And if you're really invested in helping on the financial aspect of the goal, whether it be by a little or by a lot, anything is fine. There's this. And if you're interested in whatever extra things I might post, there's my fans page. And then, of course, I have my beacons that has the links to all of my accounts across the interwebs. I don't think I have anything else of note to say. But the next video that I upload a week from the posting of this video, I think it'll be my channel rendering. Anyway, bye-bye for now.